Hello, my name is Yustina and I'm here with Amaan, and we will be discussing the tort law video analysis. So the video that we will be discussing is the hot air balloon crash where 16 people were killed as the balloon crashed into a power line in Texas. What was the tort committed? So the tort that was committed in this video is the tort of negligence. Who is at fault and who is liable? So the person who is at fault or is liable is the pilot and owner Alfred Skip Nichols, who was flying the hot air balloon. Since he passed away during the crash, his company, Heart of Texas Hot Air Balloon Rides, will be responsible for the deaths of the passengers. The five-part legal test that the plaintiff must prove. So in order to establish a negligence action, the plaintiff must go through 5 steps that help the court assess whether the defendant has been negligent and on what basis. These steps include: does the defendant owe the plaintiff a duty of care? This means, is the defendant responsible to avoid carelessness that can cause harm to others? To do so, the plaintiff must demonstrate reasonable, foreseeable, and proximity. This is divided in 2 steps. Is there prima facie duty of care? Meaning, is the defendant able to anticipate the harm caused, and is there a relationship of sufficient proximity between the parties that it would be unfair to impose a duty of care on the defendant? Are there other policy considerations that may negate imposing duty of care? Was the standard of care breached? This conduct is judged by the standards of a reasonable person. Were damages sustained? The plaintiff must show the harm would have not occurred but for the defendant's actions. Was the damage caused by breach? Would the harm not have occurred but for the defendant's actions? And was the damage too remote? This includes whether the actual harm suffered was reasonably foreseeable or not. So now I'll be applying the 5-part legal test in the case of the hot air balloon crash. So does the defendant owe the passengers on the air balloon a duty of care? As the pilot of the air balloon, he is responsible for the safety of each individual, ensuring safe practices and safe travels during the flight. He is responsible for knowing the route of the travels and being aware of any climate or wind changes to ensure the safety of the passengers. The defendant can anticipate that harm can be caused during the flight, as there are obstacles and climate changes that can cause risk when flying a hot air balloon. There are no policies that would negate imposing the duty of care. Was the standard of care breached? The standard of care was breached in this case because the pilot did not see or avoid the power lines that resulted in the crash. The pilot is responsible for knowing the route of the travels as well as any air changes that would affect it. The pilot is also responsible for navigating the hot air balloon by lowering it or bringing it higher to avoid such obstacles. Were damages sustained? There were many damages sustained as everyone on the flight lost their lives. Not only were there physical damages, but also mental, emotional, and financial damages to their families. Was the damages caused by breach? The damages were caused by breach because the pilot is responsible for his passengers' safety, and because of his carelessness, they all lost their lives. Was the damage too remote? The damage was not too remote, as it is always a danger when flying a hot air balloon. However, it is the responsibility of the pilot to avoid these risks. I will pass the presentation on to my partner, Amaan.
How did a defendant fail to meet their standard of care? They didn't forecast the weather appropriately. Additional to that, the balloon was flying on its maximum allowed safety altitude on a fog and misty weather. The pilot also had a history of drunk driving and drug-related convictions. Who will win the lawsuits? The plaintiffs will win the lawsuits because, according to the 4-part legal test, defendant owed the plaintiff a duty of care, the standard of care was breached, the damages were sustained, the damages also caused a breach, and the damages wasn't remote. Specific damages caused. The specific damages plaintiff would sue for are the monetary cost for transportation of dead body, funeral expenses, any cost of upbringing the children of the deceased, and financially supporting all the people who were dependent on the victims. Could the plaintiffs mitigate the damages? No, the plaintiffs can't mitigate the damages in this case because there are no surviving victims. Does contributory negligence apply? The contributory negligence applies to this case, as the victims could have saw the weather forecast and could even have avoided travel by seeing the fog and the misty weather.
Thank you.